What if everything you've been told about being, a good leader is exactly what will get you destroyed?
I mean, it is a terrifying thought, right? Because for decades now, the business world, the political world, everyone has been completely obsessed with things like transparency, empathy, vulnerability.
Right, exactly. We are taught that those are the absolute keys to long-term success.
We are. But the stack of sources we're diving into today, it basically suggests that relying solely on those exact virtues is, well, it's a one-way ticket to losing everything.
Yeah, and we are unpacking a 500-year-old manuscript today, Niccolò Machiavelli's The Prince, along with a bunch of translation notes, historical commentary, and some wildly provocative modern critiques.
But just to be clear, the goal here isn't to just recount ancient history.
No, definitely not. We are looking for a pragmatic, completely hidden blueprint for managing crises, understanding the darker sides of human nature, and really navigating the intense power dynamics of your own life, your career, and just the modern political landscape.
And to really grasp the mechanics of this blueprint, you have to look at the laboratory where these ideas were actually forged. I mean, Renaissance Italy, specifically between like 1480 and 1530, it was not the unified, romanticized country of art and leisure that we kind of imagine today.
Right. It wasn't just Michelangelo painting the ceiling.
Exactly. It was a chaotic, fragmented bloodbath. You had 5 major powers: the Venetian Republic, the Duchy of Milan, the Papal States, the Republic of Florence, and the Kingdom of Naples.
And they were just constantly at each other's throats.
Constantly. It was a perpetual state of shifting alliances and brutal betrayals, and the military situation was just as unstable.
Well, because they didn't even have standing national armies to protect their borders, right?
Yeah.
They relied on these condottieri.
Yeah, the condottieri, which were essentially freelance mercenary captains, just guns for hire.
Which sounds like a terrible way to run a country.
Oh, it was a disaster. These mercenary groups would gladly take a city's money to fight a war, but, if the opposing side offered a better contract midway through the battle, they would just switch teams.
Wow.
Or worse, they would just conquer the city that hired them in the first place. So it was a landscape of absolute paranoia, and Florence, sitting right in the middle of this mess, was enduring severe economic decline.
And violent political whiplash, too. Constantly bouncing back and forth between a fragile republic and, the iron-fisted control of the Medici family.
Exactly. And into this absolute meat grinder steps Niccolò Machiavelli.
See, I always pictured him as this shadowy, wealthy nobleman whispering evil plots into a king's ear.
Most people do. But he was basically a self-taught civil servant from a pretty modest background. He was a completely self-made operator.
Yeah, at just 29 years old, he gets elected as the second secretary of the Florentine Republic.
Which sounds like he's, fetching coffee and taking meeting minutes.
Right. But the sources paint this as the equivalent of being a modern national security advisor.
He really was the ultimate behind-the-scenes power broker. For 14 years, he analyzed internal threats, external threats, he developed state defense policies.
And managed those high-stakes diplomatic missions to the King of France, the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope.
Yet he understood how power moved, because he was literally the one pulling the levers on behalf of Florence.
But then, of course, the political winds shift. In 1512, the Florentine Republic collapses, the Medici family violently takes back control, and Machiavelli isn't just fired, he is completely destroyed.
Yeah, he's falsely accused of conspiracy against the new Medici regime. He gets thrown into a dungeon and subjected to this horrific interrogation technique called the strappato.
Man, the physical mechanics of this are tough to even talk about. They essentially tie your hands behind your back.
Yeah, and then they hoist you up to the ceiling by a rope.
And then they just drop you.
They drop you and violently stop the rope just before you hit the floor. The force of that completely dislocates your shoulders.
And he survived this, 6 times in 3 weeks? And without ever confessing to a crime he didn't commit.
His physical and mental resilience is just astounding. Eventually, he is released due to a general amnesty, but he's banished, exiled to a small, impoverished farm outside the city.
He is utterly cut off from the high-stakes political world that he basically lived and breathed.
So let's contextualize this for a modern professional listening to this. Imagine you are a high-level executive. You live for the strategy, the high-wire negotiations, the boardroom chess matches.
And suddenly there's a hostile takeover. You are fired. Your reputation is dragged through the mud. And you are essentially exiled to a cabin in the middle of nowhere.
Right. What do you do with that kind of psychological crash?
Yeah.
Well, Machiavelli wrote a letter describing his days arguing with local farmers over pennies covered in mud.
But his nights were a completely different story.
Oh, absolutely. At night, he would undergo this fascinating ritual. He writes that he would take off his muddy everyday clothes and he would put on his royal court garments.
Wait, he is literally putting on a tailored suit alone in his house.
Exactly. Dressed for court, he would enter his study and read the histories of the great leaders of antiquity. He noted that for 4 hours every night, he forgot his poverty and he didn't fear death.
He channeled his 14 years of grueling real-world experience and all those historical studies into a tiny explosive manual.
He wrote a masterclass in survival, basically to get his job back.
And the wild part is he dedicated it to the Medicis, the exact same family that tortured and ruined him.
He was hoping they would read it, recognize his genius, and hire him as a consultant. That desperate ambition is really the engine of the whole book.
So how does a man who just lost everything advise a new leader to gain and maintain power?
He does it by stripping away all moralizing. He looks at the world exactly as it is, with all its flaws and self-interest, rather than how utopian philosophers wish it should be.
Which brings us to his first major and probably most shocking lesson in human nature. It's his concept of cruelty.
Yeah, he draws a very hard line here between cruelty well used and cruelty badly used.
Wait, so he's essentially arguing that a burst of extreme ruthlessness is actually more compassionate in the long run than dragging out small punishments.
I know, it completely breaks our modern understanding of empathy and leadership, but you have to look at the psychological mechanism he is describing.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Machiavelli argues that if a leader must commit injuries to secure their position, they must inflict them all at once. That is cruelty well used. You strike hard, fast, and comprehensively.
And cruelty badly used is what? Hesitation.
Exactly. You start small, and the punishments just trickle out over time.
Our sources highlight this crazy story about Agathocles of Syracuse to illustrate this.
Right. Agathocles. He was a commoner who climbed the military ranks and just decided he wanted to be king.
So one morning he calls the Senate and the richest, most powerful citizens together under the guise of a routine government meeting.
And then, at a signal, his soldiers slaughter every single one of them.
He wiped out his entire opposition before lunch.
He did. Now, Machiavelli does not praise Agathocles for his morality. He explicitly calls this a crime. But he points out the grim effectiveness of the psychology at play here.
Because he committed this atrocity all at once, he never had to repeat it.
Right. The initial shock absolutely terrified the public, but because the violence ended immediately, the people could eventually relax. Agathocles lived securely and successfully defended his city for decades.
If we pull this out of ancient history and drop it into a modern corporate headquarters, the underlying logic is honestly chillingly relevant.
How so?
Think about a new CEO brought in during a massive financial crisis. If you have to lay off 20% of your staff to save the company, you do it in one single day. You pull the Band-Aid off. Because if you lay off 5 people this week, 10 people next month, and string it out for half a year, you completely destroy the company culture.
Everyone is operating in a state of constant terror, wondering if they are next. No one does any real work.
Exactly. The drawn-out cruelty breeds perpetual anxiety and resentment.
And it's interesting because Machiavelli pairs this with the exact opposite strategy for handing out rewards.
Oh, right.
While injuries must be inflicted instantly and completely, benefits, bonuses, and favors should be handed out very slowly, drop by drop.
Drip feed the good stuff so they constantly taste it, but drop the anvil all at once.
Precisely. And that transitions perfectly into the ultimate leadership dilemma, one that every modern politician or manager wrestles with. Is it better to be loved or feared?
The classic Machiavelli question.
Machiavelli acknowledges that ideally a leader should be both, but practically speaking, blending those two emotions is nearly impossible.
So if you are forced to choose, he states unequivocally that it is far safer to rely on fear.
He does.
I get the pragmatism, but that sounds incredibly cynical. I mean, why rely on fear when a deeply loyal, loving team will, walk through fire for you?
Because Machiavelli views human nature through a very strict lens of survival. He observes that people are generally fickle, ungrateful, and driven primarily by self-interest.
So loyalty is conditional.
Highly conditional. When times are prosperous, they will swear ultimate loyalty to you. But the moment real danger approaches, or the moment their personal interests diverge from yours, they will abandon you.
Love is just a bond of obligation, basically.
Right. And because humans are flawed, they will break that bond the second it benefits them.
But fear, on the other hand?
Fear is held together by the dread of punishment. And that dread never leaves them. It is just a much more reliable anchor for human behavior.
Okay, but there has to be a trap door here. You can't just terrorize people indefinitely without causing a revolt.
No, you can't. And that is the most crucial caveat in his entire philosophy. It's the invisible boundary line you absolutely cannot cross.
Which is?
You can be feared, but you must never be hated. Hatred is the absolute guarantee of a leader's destruction.
So how does a leader project enough authority to be feared, but avoid crossing over into the kind of hatred that starts revolutions?
He gives a very specific structural rule for this. Keep your hands off two things: the property of your subjects and their women.
Leave their money and their families alone, and the broader public will generally remain content.
Right. And he makes a really profound psychological observation here. He says, people will forget the death of their father much faster than they will forget the loss of their inheritance.
Wow. Why property specifically, though? Why does taking someone's money trigger a deeper, more dangerous hatred than executing your family member?
It really comes down to generational survival and the constant visual reminder of loss. If a father is executed, he is buried, and time eventually dulls the sharpest edges of that grief.
But if you seize a family's land or their wealth,
You are impoverishing their children and their grandchildren. Every single day when that family struggles to eat, they are freshly reminded of the leader who stole their prosperity.
the grievance becomes structural and permanent.
Exactly.
Translating that to a modern professional environment is super eye-opening. Like, a manager can be incredibly strict. They can demand perfection, put people on performance improvement plans, fire underperformers.
And that generates fear and respect.
Right, but the moment a leader steals a subordinate's credit, unfairly docks their pay, or publicly humiliates them just to feed the leader's own ego, you cross into hatred.
And a hated manager will inevitably be sabotaged by their own team. No amount of institutional power can protect a leader who is universally hated by their own people.
So if you are walking this tightrope projecting fear, avoiding hatred, how do you actually deal with external threats? How do you handle your enemies while managing your public image?
Well, Machiavelli introduces this wild piece of Greek mythology to explain it. He brings up Chiron the centaur.
The mythical creature who was half man and half beast, right? The guy who trained ancient heroes like Achilles.
Yes, Machiavelli uses this hybrid creature to symbolize the dual nature a successful leader must possess. You must know how to fight with laws, which is the way of men, and you must know how to fight with force, which is the way of beasts.
Because relying only on laws and rules will leave you completely defenseless against people who refuse to play by them.
Exactly. But he refines the beast metaphor even further by splitting it into two specific animals. You can't just be a rampaging brute.
Right. He says a leader must be both a fox and a lion.
You must be a fox to recognize the hidden traps your enemies set for you, and you must be a lion to frighten off the wolves that come to attack you outright.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you are only a lion, just brute strength and aggression, you will walk blindly into a PR trap or a legal snare set by a clever competitor.
Yeah, you'll get outmaneuvered.
And if you are only a fox, just cunning and manipulative, you might outsmart people, but you lack the sheer authoritative power to crush a direct threat.
You really have to know when to sneak and when to roar. And this dual nature leads directly to his most controversial insight on public relations.
Which is?
We are culturally conditioned to believe that leaders must possess absolute moral integrity, right? They must be honest, merciful, and ethical at all times.
Sure, that's the ideal.
Well, Machiavelli argues that it's actually dangerous for a leader to always practice these virtues.
Hold on, it's a literal liability to be a consistently good person.
In the cutthroat realm of statecraft and high-level power, yes. If you are always honest and merciful, you become entirely predictable.
And your enemies will map your morality and use it to engineer your downfall.
Exactly. However, and this is where his genius for modern PR really shines, it is absolutely vital to appear to have all these virtues.
You must project an image of being merciful, faithful, humane, and upright.
Right. He points to Pope Alexander VI as the ultimate master of this illusion. This was a pope who did almost nothing but deceive people.
He made grand promises, swore sacred oaths, and just abandoned them the moment it suited his political interests.
Yet he was wildly successful. He understood that the masses judge almost entirely by appearances. Machiavelli says people judge with their eyes, not their hands.
Meaning, everyone can see the image you project, but very few are close enough to touch the reality of who you actually are.
The public only really cares about the final result. If a politician secures the economy, or a CEO saves the company from bankruptcy, The sometimes ruthless methods they used behind closed doors will be rationalized.
And forgiven by the public. It is all about maintaining the optics of the fox while executing the duties of the lion.
But operating with that level of calculated deception creates a massive internal vulnerability.
Yeah, if you are playing this 3D chess game of manipulation, how do you even hire people? I mean, I would be completely paranoid that everyone around me is trying to fox and lion me in return.
It's a valid fear. Who can a leader actually trust?
Yeah.
Machiavelli was deeply preoccupied with this, largely because he watched Florence suffer for years by outsourcing their security.
Right, the mercenaries.
His first rule of team building is to absolutely reject mercenaries.
Yeah.
Never rely on someone else's power.
So in a modern context, that's like completely outsourced external agencies handling your core competencies.
Yes. They are fundamentally dangerous, they are ambitious, undisciplined, and loyal only to a paycheck.
Our sources tell this incredible story about Cesare Borgia that illustrates how to solve this exact problem.
Ah, Cesare Borgia. He is really Machiavelli's ideal specimen of leadership. Borgia was trying to conquer and pacify the Romagna region.
And initially he used French troops and mercenary captains.
But he quickly realized these hired guns were untrustworthy and could easily turn on him. So he lured the mercenary leaders to a fake peace banquet and just had them all strangled.
Classic Machiavellian move. Eliminate the borrowed power so he could build his own loyal in-house army.
But the way Borgia pacified the Romagna region afterward is an absolute masterclass in psychological manipulation.
Because the area was overrun with crime, corruption, and violent gangs, right?
Yes. Borgia knew restoring order would require extreme bloody violence, which would violate Machiavelli's rule about avoiding hatred.
So how does he do it? He delegates the cruelty.
Exactly. He appoints a notoriously ruthless minister named Ramiro de Orco and gives him absolute unchecked power to clean up the region.
And Ramiro does exactly that. He crushes the gangs, restores order, but his brutal methods make him despised by the entire population.
And Borgia doesn't just watch as this happen, he weaponizes it.
Oh, so?
Once the region is completely pacified and safe, Borgia realizes the extreme authority is no longer needed. And more importantly, he knows the public's hatred for Ramiro could eventually transfer to him, the man who appointed him.
Right. So one morning, the citizens of Cesena wake up to find Ramiro de Orco chopped in half in the public square with a block of wood and a bloody executioner's knife left right beside him.
He brutally executes his own hatchet man, the guy who followed his orders perfectly.
That is insane.
Machiavelli writes that this horrific spectacle left the people simultaneously satisfied and terrified.
Borgia restored order, blamed all the necessary brutality on his subordinate, and then played the righteous savior by executing the quote-unquote tyrant.
He manipulated the public's emotions perfectly to gain absolute control while keeping his own hands seemingly clean.
Okay, the Borgia story is wild, but it relies on finding a guy willing to do your dirty work. In reality, if you surround yourself with ruthless hatchet men, aren't you just inviting people who will eventually turn on you?
It's a huge risk.
So how do you actually find loyal advisors in this hyper-cynical system without getting stabbed in the back?
Machiavelli proposes a very simple stress test for a minister. When you observe your advisor, do they think more about themselves than about you?
Do they seek their own personal profit in every action?
If so, they will never be a trustworthy minister. A good advisor must merge their own success entirely with the leader's success.
But the leader also has to carefully manage the flow of information to avoid the trap of flatterers, right? Because if everyone is just telling you how brilliant you are, you're flying blind.
The natural human ego just loves flattery. The only way to guard against it is to make it clear that telling you the hard truth will not offend you.
But there is a massive risk here. If you let everyone tell you the truth whenever they want, you lose your aura of authority and respect.
People will start treating you like a peer rather than a boss.
So how do you control that feedback loop?
You curate an exclusive inner circle. A wise leader chooses a select few advisors and grants only them the freedom to speak the truth.
And crucially, they're only allowed to speak the truth on the specific topics the leader explicitly asks about.
You ask for their unvarnished opinion, you listen patiently to gather the data, and then you make up your own mind and stick to your decision.
The sources cite Emperor Maximilian as a disastrous counterexample of this.
Yeah, Maximilian was incredibly secretive. He never consulted anyone during his planning phase. But the moment he tried to execute his secret plans, his court would push back and criticize him.
Because he hadn't built a controlled feedback loop, he couldn't handle the sudden opposition, and he would just constantly change his mind.
A leader must actively seek advice, but only on their own terms, not when the advisors feel like giving it.
Okay, so you're projecting the illusion of virtue. You're playing the fox and the lion. You have eliminated the mercenaries and curated a tight circle of truth tellers.
You've done everything right.
But you can still fail completely. Why? Because of the ultimate uncontrollable variable that Machiavelli calls fortune.
Fortune is just the sheer randomness of life. The bad luck, the sudden economic crash, the global pandemic. You could be the most brilliant strategist alive and still get wiped out by fortune.
He uses this terrifying, vivid metaphor of a raging, flooded river to describe it.
When a massive storm hits, the river overflows its banks, tears down ancient trees, destroys buildings, washes away the earth itself.
Everyone runs from it. No one can stand in its way.
But Machiavelli is too pragmatic to just surrender to fate. His solution is what you do before the storm.
You build the dams and dikes during peacetime. When the weather is calm and sunny, that is when you do the grueling, unglamorous work of preparation.
You don't wait for the crisis to figure out your crisis management plan.
If you build the infrastructure when things are fine, then when the flood inevitably comes, the water is channeled. It might cause damage, but it won't completely destroy you.
Exactly that. Fortune shows her true destructive power only where no skill or preparation has been organized to resist her.
But preparation is only half the battle. The other half is adaptability. Machiavelli makes a really profound observation about how leaders become obsolete.
Right. What causes a successful leader to suddenly fail? It's a failure to change their nature.
A strategy that made you wildly successful yesterday might destroy you tomorrow if the environment changes.
A leader who is naturally cautious will prosper during times that require careful defensive maneuvering. But when the times shift and suddenly demand bold, aggressive action, that same cautious leader will be ruined.
Because they cannot adapt their psychology, which is incredibly difficult. As humans, we want to retreat to our comfort zones. We want to use the playbook that got us the promotion in the first place.
That rigidity is fatal. However, if forced to choose a default state, Machiavelli argues it is better to be impetuous and bold than overly cautious.
Fortune favors the bold, essentially.
The leaders who survive the longest are the ones whose personal methods align perfectly with the unique character of the times they are living in.
So, as we pull all these threads together, what is the ultimate actionable takeaway for you, the listener, heading into your life and career tomorrow?
Well, the blueprint we've extracted isn't an instruction manual on becoming an evil tyrant.
You aren't going to go to the office and chop your middle managers in half.
We certainly hope not.
The core lesson here is to embrace radical pragmatism. Deal with the world exactly as it is, with all its sharp edges, complex motivations, and self-interest.
Don't base your strategies on the utopian world you wish existed. Prepare your dams during your peaceful seasons. Never rely on borrowed power.
And deeply understand the mechanisms of fear, respect, and why people actually do what they do.
There's one final, fascinating paradox drawn from our source material that completely shifts the perspective on everything we've just discussed today.
Oh, right. Lay it on us.
For 500 years, Machiavelli has been branded a devil. But thinkers like the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau argued that the prince might actually be a brilliant piece of satire or a covert warning.
Wait, you mean the ultimate tyrant's playbook was actually a warning against tyrants?
Think about Machiavelli's life.
Yeah.
He was a staunch Republican who was tortured and ruined by tyrants. Rousseau suggests that by pretending to write a manual for kings, Machiavelli was actually exposing the dark, hidden playbook of power to the everyday public.
He was pulling back the curtain on how deception, cruelty, and the illusion of virtue truly operate at the highest levels.
So that the public could recognize these maneuvers in real time and protect themselves. He wasn't teaching the prince how to rule the republic. He was teaching the republic how to survive the prince.
That completely flips the script. It frames the entire text not as a guide for oppression, but as an education in self-defense.
It really does.
So as you step out into your day, look closely at the leadership around you. Look at the politicians on your screens or the executives making decisions in your boardroom.
Look past their PR campaigns and their meticulously crafted illusions of virtue.
What are you really seeing? Are you looking at a fox? Are you looking at a lion? Or are you looking at a centaur quietly playing both sides of the game? And more importantly, are you building your dams before the river floods?